Hello and welcome. My name is Demo, and today we're going to take a look at setting up basic animations in Avatars 3.0. I'm assuming that you've watched my previous video on your basic setup, and this is where I left off on my screen, and so we'll just continue from here. The first thing that you're going to want to do is set up over here on the right where it says expressions. This is the expressions menu that runs basically anything animation related on your avatar as of 3.0. We no longer have facial expressions tied to the gestures. Like when you point at something, that would be a gesture. They've now split those, and it no longer works the same. It's a little tricky to set up the first time, so bear with me. It's a little bit of a process, but we're going to set up something simple here, and hopefully this helps you out. So the first thing is you need an expressions menu. To get one, down here in your folders, I'm just going to put it in the base folder for my little tutorial here. Just right click, create VRChat, VR scriptable objects, and click expressions menu. You can name this whatever you'd like. I start with main menu, and back on your model, you would basically just drag the main menu in here. Now it has a menu. There's nothing in that menu, but it has one. Now, when you click on main menu to bring it into focus, you'll see that it requires stage parameters. This is another file that you create, same space in the VRC scriptable objects, and click stage parameters, and it's again just another file, name it whatever you want, and this is where you set parameters for your animations. And you'll want to drag that into this space, and now you can see that you can add controls. We're going to do something very simple and set up some facial expressions just to get started. So you'd want to add control. Now in here there's a number of types that you can use. You can make submenus, which you will just go deeper and deeper the more submenus you put in. As far as I know, there's no limits, except for how many parameters you can use. Basically, your creativity is your limits. You have basic buttons, you have an on-off type toggle, and a 2 and 4 axis puppet and a radial puppet. Now, the puppets are probably going to be the most used. I'm going to start with a 2-axis puppet, which is basically one axis is up and down, the other axis left and right. So you technically have more than just, like, some people think it means you only have 2 options, but this actually gives you quite a few. Now, what I'm going to do is, as you see, it says label up, label right, label down, left. I'm going to type in the expressions that I'm going to put in here. We'll have one for happy, one for angry, surprised, maybe, and maybe a wink. Just some basic stuff. Now it's going to want parameters. This particular control has 3 parameters. The first parameter is basically what the system would see if you're looking at this menu. If this menu is selected, that's the parameter that it sees. And then the other 2 parameters are the horizontal and vertical coordinates on this menu, which will make more sense when we get into that. So I actually need to create parameters for this. So I'm going to go into the stage parameters, and these first three are the defaults for animation controllers. I'm going to leave them there. You don't have to leave them there. However, you may need them later, so I would just leave them there, and we're just going to create a new one. I'm going to call this faces, and that's going to be the main parameter for the system to look at when I am on my faces menu. And then I'm going to make faces H for horizontal and faces V for vertical, and I'm going to change these both to float. And I'm not going to get into what integers and floats are specifically, but an integer is basically a whole number, like 1, 2, 3. Floats are small numbers between -1 and +1 in very, very small increments. Very precise location type stuff is usually what you would use it for. So in parameters, I'm going to select faces, and I'm going to pick faces H on the horizontal and faces V on the vertical. And then I'm going to name my control faces. It doesn't really matter what you're naming this, but this is what shows up on the menu in the game when you're looking at it. And then you set a value. For this case, I'm just going to use value 1. Anything other than 0 that is a whole number should work here. Up to 255, I believe. So you'll be able to figure it out as you go, but 1 should work just fine. Now, what I'm going to do is actually duplicate my model, because we're going to get into animation stuff, and it always works a lot better if you're if you use a duplicate. It tends to mess up models a bit. If you're using your main model, of course it won't let me rename it for some reason. Alright, just took a second there. Now, on the animation one, the reason I did this is because what you need to do now is create an animation. Over here on animation layers, if you click customize, you'll see that there are now a whole bunch of animation layers. We don't really use the controller up here at the top anymore. However, when you create an animation, it wants to put a controller in here, and so that's why I generally use a copy, basically, in order to make sure that that controller is not filled on my main avatar. They otherwise should be fairly similar. But what I'm going to do is right click and create an animator controller, and I'm going to name this FX. The layers are for different things. Base mostly controls your locomotion, and additive gets added to that. I mean, you can put whatever you want in most of these. Actions would probably be more like dancing or something like that. FX, though, is special. It's only for effects. Like, anything that does not move your model but affects your model. For example, if you wanted to change the clothes, which you can do now in the animation system, if you wanted to change the clothes or change the texture on the clothes or change your facial expression, all of that type of stuff is FX. And so we want to click on the button so that it opens up the FX, and we're going to drag our controller in here. Now, in the animator, you need to set up your layers, or sorry, not your layers, your parameters to match the stage parameters that you have. So in this case, we're using faces, face H, face V. We need to add those by clicking on the little plus button here, and we need an integer, which is faces, and then we need two floats. One is face H, and the other is face V. Now that we have our parameters set up, we can start working on the actual animation for this, or the animation controller, I should say. This particular model already has animations created for all of the facial transitions, so I'm just going to use those. There are other tutorials out there on how to actually make animations, so I'm not going to go into that. But if you right click, create state, empty, it makes this new little box, and from here, I name this wait, and this is basically just to wait until faces, which is the variable for, or the parameter for our menu, it's going to wait for this parameter to be 1, because that's what we set up in the menu. And so we just put this here to make it wait, and then create state and create a new blend tree. Right click on wait, make transition, and then click on blend tree, and then I usually just make a transition to exit. I'm not sure if that's required. I've seen some people say no, but it's been working for me, so I'm going to go with it. It makes it real simple, clean. Now what you want to do is click on this line. This is the actual transition from the wait state to your blend tree. Now what we need it to do is we need it to wait until faces equals 1. So you add a condition, make sure faces is selected, and then equals, and change this to a 1. Now on the other side, you put faces equals 0, so that when it goes to 1, it hits your blend tree. When it hits 2, when it goes back to 0, it'll exit. And I'm going to name my blend tree faces for future use, and then double click on faces, and this brings up your actual blend tree. Now the blend tree blends animations together, is the simplest way to describe it, and you want to add some animations to it. I'm going to use 4 animations, so I'll just add 4 of these, and then go to my animations and find the ones that I wanted. Let's see, we had a happy, so we'll just grab happy and angry. What else did I use? Surprised, and we'll use this one for the wink. Now these may not be left, right, up, down exactly, but we can sort that out as we go. Up here, you'll want to switch from 1D to one of the 2D options. I like the freeform directional, personally, but you'll have to play with them, see what you like. Now you have to define at what position. Basically, this is your joystick, and where you're on this, where in this square the joystick is is where you have to point in order to make these animations trigger. So if you set position Y to 1, you'll see one of these goes up to the top. The happy grin is going to be at the top. Now, a position of -1 or -1 is going to put it at the bottom. And then you want one for the right and for the left. And now that separates out the 4 of them to the 4 corners of your joystick. Now what you can do is drag your model down here if it's not already showing, and zoom in on the face a little bit. And I just noticed I missed one small step. You can see her face is a little messed up. We need one more field. Or at least I've found it works best if you have one more that is neutral. And this animation actually doesn't have anything on it. It doesn't do anything at all. It's one frame of nothing. And as you can see, it puts her face at a neutral position, and that's what your centered default is. Now, if you move, you can see the red dot there moving, and as it moves, it changes through the thing, through the different animations. Now we want it to move everywhere, so up here at the parameters, you'll see there's face H and face H. We want a face H and a face V, so that we have vertical and horizontal movement. And now you can move everywhere. So when you move to this side, it goes surprised. This is a wink. That's angry. That's happy. Now what I'm going to do real quick is make sure that I have these lined up in the correct spot. So I'm going to check my menu, and up should be happy and right is angry. So I'm going to fix those real quick, because up is happy. Once you have all these set up, then you would go to your SDK. And alright, so this is not obviously a very performance friendly avatar, but we click build and test, and this will another new feature in Avatar 3.0 is local testing. This will build the avatar and store it locally so that you can load the avatar and test it without actually having to upload it to the servers. Just remember to build and publish if you actually want it online to be playable. And this takes a few minutes. I'm going to fast forward here to it being done. Alright, now that that is done building, you can just click OK. And now this is actually ready to be tested locally. And so now what we do is we switch over to I'm going to switch over to VRChat here, and this is just a little avatar I had loaded up. But when you go to avatars, you'll see this other section, and they won't have icons, but it says SDK, whatever the name of your avatar is, and in this case it's tutorial. I will click on that and click change, and this will load the local avatar that we just set up. Now in here, on the keyboard it's R. If you're actually using a VR headset, then you would click down on any of the joysticks, brings up this new menu, and this is our new Avatar 3.0 menu. Expressions is the menu that we created. If you choose that, you see faces. That's the control that we set up, and when you hit faces, now you can see up says happy, it's angry, wink, surprised. Doesn't look like it's quite working. But you see, those two are working. Happy and surprised don't seem to be working, so I'm going to switch back over to Unity and see if I can figure out why. After a little digging around, I found exactly what I did wrong. Let me switch this back to Unity. So this points out a really good example of what not to do. Some of you may have caught it. In my parameters, I had face at H and then faces V. This should be face V. And the problem is, it would have been okay, like it doesn't really matter what you name them. However, in the animator, these parameters have to be the same as the ones in these parameters. They have to be spelt the same. If they're not spelt the same, then whatever you set here, for example, this was faces V in the menu, and so when I move face V to move stuff, to transition between the animations, it was not transmitting it, as it were, back to here, because it was the wrong thing. Now that that's done, we can build again and re-upload it. Alright, now that that's done, we can go ahead and switch back over to the game. And as before, every time you reload, like I just left the game open, every time you make changes and do a new build, you have to reload that avatar. Now that she's loaded, bring our menu up again, expressions, faces, and now you see there's happy, surprised, wink, angry. Now because this is on an axis, you can blend between your faces. Some of it is not exactly desirable, but you could set up some really creative combinations. And that pretty much covers it for that particular animation set. I will be posting more videos showing the other types of animations, and I hope you enjoyed this and hope it was informative, and I will catch you in the next one.